On our last video, we took a look at the Dorian mode and gave you a 6-step exercise to practice the scale. Well, today we're going to take a look at the Mixolydian mode. In a tonal context, the Mixolydian and Dorian scales are very much related to one another. While Dorian is the perfect scale for minor 7 chords, the Mixolydian scale is perfect for dominant chords. And in 2/5 progressions, both scales are made up of the same exact notes because Dorian and Mixolydian are the 2nd and 5th mode of the major scale. I'm going to dip into the 2/5 progression later on in the video, but for now, let's start with step 1. Like we did with Dorian, let's play the major scale starting on the root and then the exact same notes starting on the 5th degree. Now, I want you to think of the steps formula of the Mixolydian scale. That's whole, whole, half, and then whole. And pay attention at where the half steps are in the scale. Also, think of the intervals that you are playing. Mixolydian is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and flat 7. You can see it as a major scale with a flat 7 instead of a major 7. So in step 2, we're playing the Mixolydian scale in all keys by thinking of these properties. Okay, now that you've practiced the Mixolydian scale in all keys, we should take a look at where we can use this mode for improvisation. As I mentioned before, in a 2/5, the Mixolydian mode is built with the same set of notes as the Dorian mode. So in a D minor 7 to G7 progression, we can use Dorian over the D minor and Mixolydian over the G7. It's important to notice that these are 2/5s targeting a major chord. For 2/5s in minor, we're better off with other variations of Mixolydian, such as the Mixolydian flat 9, flat 13, and others that we'll discuss later in other videos. In fact, in a 2/5, we can just think of and play the Mixolydian scale on the 5/7 and completely ignore the Dorian scale. But I want you to really understand why this is the case. The reason might seem obvious since both scales are made up of the same notes. In a D minor 7 G7 progression, D Dorian contains the same notes as G Mixolydian. So at first glance, it might seem evident that just playing D Dorian or G Mixo on a 2/5 would yield the same results. But that's not the case. Each note in a mode offers a different amount of tension. And this is an essential concept to grasp if you want to master your lines when you improvise. But be very careful with this concept because the tension release contour of the notes in a mode is completely different when we play in a tonal context versus playing in a modal context. This Dorian mixo duality that I'm talking about right now works best in a tonal context. Before we dive deep into this concept, I want you to practice the following step. Step 3. Over a 2/5 progression, play the 2 minor 7 arpeggio and resolve the flat 7 of the minor 7 chord to the 3rd of the 5 chord. On a D minor 7 to G7, we're going to play this. Now, take it for a spin across all keys. To understand why mixo can replace Dorian mixo in a 2/5 progression, we have to look at the purpose of the 2 chord in a 2/5. Actually, with that last step, you've just trained your ears to understand the use of the 2 chord in a 2/5 progression. The flat 7 in a 2 chord wants to move to the 3 of the 5 chord. The C in D minor 7 wants to resolve to the B of the G7. This creates a subdominant to dominant contour. The 5 chord's purpose, or any other dominant function's purpose for that matter, is to add tension to the progression. And the related 2 in a 2/5 is used as a ramp to get to that 5 chord with ease. In other words, the 2 chord smooths out the tension release contour within the progression. This technique is so effective that we can always interpolate a related 2 chord of any dominant chord. And that works for any dominant chord, primary or secondary. For example, on this C7, we can interpolate the related 2, G minor 7. The C7 is a 5/7 of 4, and we can smooth out the contour by interpolating the 2 of 4 right in front of it. On the other hand, every time we see a 2/5, we can consider the 2 as a chord that was interpolated and completely replace it with just the 5 chord. So in this A minor 7 to D7, we can see the A minor 7 as an interpolated 2 and replace the entire measure with just the D7 chord and only think of D Mixolydian for the entire measure. So in step 4, we're going to practice thinking Mixolydian over a 2/5 progression. And let's add a chromatic passing tone between the 1 and the flat 7. This is known as a bebop scale, but I want you to see it as a Mixolydian without passing tone. So we're completely ignoring the D minor 7 and just thinking of a G mixo. As we did on the Dorian mode, adding a passing tone gives us a line in which the chord tones of our dominant chord land on the downbeats, while the other tones are on the upbeats, functioning as passing tones. And this is a defining characteristic of any bebop scale. Step 5, now practice the same scale going up. Step 6, let's start on the 9 and add another chromatic passing tone. On step 7, we're going to target 2 essential notes in the Mixolydian scale, the 9th and the 13th. These 2 tensions contain the best Mixolydian colors for jazz improvisation. So there you have it. Hope that was helpful. Hope you learned a thing or two about the Mixolydian scale and how to use it to improvise.